Today we're comparing the if statement in C# with the switch statement in C#, and specifically two formats of if and switch. The if, else format, which we really didn't look at in the last tutorial, and the switch case statement with a break at the end of the block of the case statement, and then ended with a default statement. And I discussed in the last video that there's 6 conditional operators that can be used by if. The less than, the greater than, the equal, the not equal, the less than or equal, and the greater than or equal. And I also described 3 logical operators: the and, the or, and the not. And even though I said there were 6 conditional operators, we only used one, the less than. I think it's sort of obvious how the others work. You know, if you want the first one, compare if the first one is greater than the second one, you use the greater than sign. And if you want to compare if the first one is either greater than or equal to the second one, you'd use the greater than or equal than sign, and so on. So I didn't really dwell on it. I just ended up using the less than. But in the case of this, we're only going to be using the equal. And the reason for that is that the switch sort of has an implied equal. You don't directly specify equal, but each of the case statements is in effect an equal statement. This will become more obvious when we start looking at the actual code. In order to run this test, we need a form where we can enter a name with a text box and then press search, and then we get a search result that's displayed in this label, which right now just says search result. And the 6 names we're searching for are John Carter, Deja Thoris, Sola, Tars Tarkas, Sob Thon, and Matai Shang. So if we look at the code for this written in if, else, if, basically the first if statement, well, initially we're converting the text box into a string called a search string. And then the first if statement, we're comparing this string to the name John Carter with the equal. It says, is this exactly equal? And if this proves to be true, this resolves into a bool. And if this bool is true, then we set the label text property to name found. And then rather than just having the if statement end, we're going to have else if, which says if this turned out not to be true, then make this comparison. If this turned out to be true, then we're all done. We don't look at any of the rest of this statement. And that's true in each step of the way. So we say else if the string's equal to Deja Thoris, then we do exactly the same thing. We set the name found string into the label. And we have an else if for each one of these names. And then at the bottom we have an else, which basically says if none of these turned out to be true, then we print out name not found. And essentially what this means is that we have what's known as a nested if. You can have a literal nested if where you put another if inside this statement, but we're basically saying there's a dependency of all these else ifs. Like none of them are going to be reached if we hit a true before. So in effect we're saving some time by not going through all of them. Well, if we compile and run this code and then put in the name Sola, which is one of the 6 names, and do a search, it says name found. But if we put in some other name like Doug, and do a search. It tries all the ifs and else ifs, and finally gets to the else and prints out name not found. A somewhat more compact way of doing this, and I think cleaner way of doing it, is the switch statement, where we say switch and then we pass in the string we want to compare to a list of other strings, or it could be numbers or whatever. And then we have a brace for the beginning of the body of the switch and a brace at the end of the switch, and then within the switch body we have case quotation mark John Carter semicolon, and once again we set the label equal to name found if these two strings are found to be equal. So this is where the implied equal is in this switch case statement. And then at the bottom of the block of the case statement we have a break, and I'm pretty sure if we don't have a break, what happens is all these other cases are executed as though they are true. That's the way it used to be in the old C language, and I suspect it's the same in C#. In any case, you don't want to take any chances, so put a break at the end of the case block to make sure it breaks out and drops out of the switch. And if it doesn't find John Carter, it compares a string to Deja Thoris, sets the label equal to name found if it's that. Same thing with Sola, Tars Tarkas, and so on. And then if none of these turn out to be true, we have the equivalent of the else at the end of all the else if statements, and we have a default, and it's saying if nothing in the case statements prove to be true, then set the label equal to name not found. So if we compile and run this and type in Lana, we get name not found. But then if we type in John Carter, we get name found. So essentially it works identically to the if else if, but I think the switch is much cleaner and much more self-documenting. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you learned something from it, and don't forget to subscribe.